Good morning, dear Prime Minister Fiala, dear colleagues. On the 1st of July, we welcomed the Czech Republic at the helm of the Council of the European Union, and today it is a pleasure to have with us Prime Minister Fiala to present the programme of activities of the Czech Presidency. Prime Minister, dear Petr, welcome to the European Parliament. Prime Minister, you, along with the Prime Ministers of Poland and Slovenia, were the first European leaders to visit Kiev when it was besieged in a message of solidarity. We know that European unity with Ukraine and its people will be central to the Czech Presidency's agenda, and this is why, with an illegal war on our continent, your presidency comes at a turning point in history. So our next steps will be decisive for our common future. This is not time to backtrack on our ambitions. We need to address the economic and social consequences of the pandemic. This is why we must accelerate our digital and green transitions, and here the Czech Presidency can count on the commitment of this House to make progress on the Fit for 55 package, as well as the European Chips Act and the Artificial Intelligence Act. Dear Prime Minister, dear Petr, just a few weeks ago you welcomed us, together with all the presidents of the leaders of the parliamentary groups, in Prague, and it is in this constructive spirit that the European Parliament will continue to work with your presidency on the many important initiatives on the table. On behalf of this House, I therefore wish you every success in the coming months. So, dear Prime Minister, I will now give you the floor.
Madam President, dear Roberta, dear members of the European Parliament, Madam President of the Commission, dear Ursula, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to be here today to present the Czech Republic's plans for our presidency of the Council of the EU. This is the second presidency for my country, but the first under the Lisbon Treaty. We are building on the excellent French presidency. It has managed to complete a number of proposals successfully. It was not easy to find a compromise in such a difficult debate like the Fit for 55 package in the area of climate, or on new rules for the digital economy. But the most important thing that was achieved during the French presidency was a united action in response to Russia's aggression against Ukraine. Our response was quick, it was tough, and most importantly, it was united. 6 packages of sanctions were not approved easily. A number of member states had to give up their positions, some of their economic interest and some of their comfort. But because we were convinced that it was right to stand up to Russia and to help our friend and ally, I mean Ukraine, we did it. Together we also granted candidate status to Ukraine and Moldova. It gave them hope and faith in the future and in joining free democratic Europe. Our presidency wants to build on this work. And now, according to the European Parliament tradition, allow me to present the main priorities of our presidency in my mother language, in Czech.
Ladies and gentlemen, the topics and priorities that we want to focus on have been created over a period of many months, but 24th February 2022 turned most of our plans upside down, literally. Our priorities reflect this new situation. We are in a time where war is being waged just outside the EU's borders. This is a classic conventional conflict many of us thought was a thing of the past in Europe. But apart from conventional war, Russia is also waging hybrid war, intentionally spurring a refugee wave, using energy resources as a weapon, and by targeting infrastructure, it is spurring a food crisis. From our point of view, it is very good that our membership in the EU and in NATO protects us from the most tragic consequences that are being faced by the Ukrainian people. When on the 15th of March, together with the Polish and Slovenian Prime Ministers, I visited President Zelensky in Kiev, I saw with my very own eyes the heroism of Ukrainians who were and still are fighting for their right to exist and for their right to belong to Western civilized countries. This reminded me that our values were not a matter of course, that they need to be defended day to day. The values for which Ukrainians are dying these days are values that were defended by one of the founders of the modern Czech state, the President Václav Havel. It was his inspiring essay from 1996 brought us to the motto of our presidency, which goes, Europe as a task. And indeed, Europe has many tasks before it. And similarly, the Czech Presidency of the Council has many tasks before it. The main task for the next months will be to find a united and strong agreement on such measures that will dampen as much as possible the most negative consequences of the current crises on our citizens. Because inflation, unavailability of energy or the food crisis are threats that need to be faced, and these threats are best faced together. I believe that both the Council and the European Parliament can agree on this. Europe as a task is a commitment for us. It is not a given. It is something that we will need to work on constantly, that we will need to perfect. Also, we need to adjust those things that have not been working as planned. Europe needs to lead by example. It needs to reflect its conscience, and it needs to face its challenges. Our solutions, however, need to be balanced so that too much focus on one does not damage or neglect another, for example, social peace or our economy. The Czech Republic will always, very delicately, try to reflect all opinions that will be voiced in our debates. We have to prevent a split among us. We always have to try to find the widest, most possible agreement. We have to respect the opinions and position of others, even though we may not agree with them. Havel's words on Europe as a task come, of course, from another time. They come from another Europe than what we have today, but their basic message remains the same and as strong. Our motto is to rethink, rebuild and repower. That reflects our challenges and the problems of the current Europe and our reactions to them. The Czech Presidency will want to build a safe and prosperous EU. Such an EU that will be true to its values of freedom and democracy. An EU that will enable all of its citizens to travel and work freely or become engaged in the internal market. An EU which understands that we do have a responsibility towards the environment that we need to hand over to the next generation as it is. An EU that builds on what unites us and respects what makes us diverse. That's the EU that we want. And in terms of this target, we formulated 5 pillars of the Czech presidency, which I would now like to introduce to you. The first priority is managing the refugee crisis and a post-war reconstruction of Ukraine. The Russian aggression, directly or indirectly, is impacting all member states of the EU. The direct consequences include the most massive refugee wave since the Second World War. The Czech Republic is one of the countries with the highest number of Ukrainian refugees per capita. There are more than 3.5% refugees in our population now. We do have our bitter experience with Russian imperialism. We know what aggressive Russian policy can do. The Czech Republic is therefore convinced that political and military support of Ukraine from the EU is in the utmost interest of the entire EU, with direct impact on the next future of our continent. The Czech Presidency will therefore defend and support the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine using all tools at our disposal. We will focus on a strong and united stance against Russia, as well as the maximum possible assistance to member states when providing military support to Ukraine or when compensating for the consequences of the migration wave. It is also very important to look in the future. At the last European Council, we've managed to approve the candidate status for Ukraine and Moldova. I'm very happy that in this regard we had massive support from the European Parliament as well. I would like to use this opportunity to thank you for that. But that must not be the end. Another very important task of the Czech Presidency will be preparing for a post-war reconstruction of Ukraine. We have to focus mainly on reconstructing their infrastructure, providing basic services, their economic stability and recovery. That is where the EU must play a fundamental role. After all, we discussed this with Madam von der Leyen, and we've demonstrated this on Monday at the conference on the reconstruction of Ukraine in Switzerland. The way of Ukraine to the EU will still be long, but together we need to strive that this be a successful way, that this make the EU stronger. The second priority is energy security. The current crisis has fully shown us how much the future of the EU is existentially dependent on others and how important it is to be independent, especially as far as countries which are threatening our safety are concerned. I'm talking about Russian gas, oil and coal, of course. The way of the Czech Presidency will be the way of common European projects which will rid us of our dependence on Russia. The Czech Presidency will focus on issues of energy security, to make sure that we can implement Repower EU as fast as possible, and that includes our energy resource diversification. We are ready to work on coordinating gas storage facilities before the winter. We support voluntary common acquisitions according to the model that we've used during the COVID crisis. While doing all that, we have to remember that we may find ourselves in a situation where, more than ever, it will be necessary to show solidarity between and among member states. We must not forget building energy resilience of the EU for the future through developing our energy infrastructure. At the same time, we need to support all EU emission-free energy sources, because these play a very important role when providing energy security in the EU, as well as in meeting our climate goals. The long-term goal of decarbonizing the European economy goes to a great extent hand in hand with a short-term goal to de-Russify our energy supplies, and that must be our viewpoint in this regard. To become energy independent on Russia, we have to use all options that are allowed by our geographic situation. Given the size of the EU and the number of member states, we may not apply a one-size-fits-all approach. Every member state needs to have the opportunity to choose such an energy mix that is the most suitable for their particular conditions, and using which they will be able to meet both the climate targets as well as the target of becoming independent on energy supply from Russia. If we indeed want to meet our climate goals, we have to be able to finance them in the individual countries. I'm mentioning this because today, ladies and gentlemen, you will be voting on the objection against the so-called taxonomy as introduced by the European Commission. I would like to stress that this is a very fragile proposal. It is a balanced proposal a proposal that makes it possible for a number of countries to meet their commitments stemming from our climate goals, only thanks to criteria that were presented in the proposal. Therefore, I would like to ask you to not reject this very fragile compromise. Nuclear energy and gas as a temporary energy source from safe countries are the only tool that many countries have at hand in order to achieve our common climate goals in the next years.
The war in Europe has shown how important it is to boost European defence capabilities as well as the safety and security of European cyberspace. That's our third priority. Given the current geopolitical situation, it is of key importance that we boost European safety and security and defence capabilities. NATO is in this matter a natural partner to the EU, and the implementation of the key issues within the strategic compass is the appropriate framework. We shall work on boosting European cooperation in boosting defence capabilities. It is of urgent importance to top up the military warehouse provisions together with that member states have provided to the Ukraine. We also consider it of great importance to develop our defence industry and reduce our dependence on not trustworthy countries. In the long term, we shall work on facilitating joint purchasing of military material. We are also facing new types of threats that are being used by our enemies. We shall therefore focus on cyber threats and making Europe more resilient vis-à-vis outside threats such as fights against disinformation, the safety of the cyberspace, as well as key EU infrastructure protection, including institutions protection. And that's what we have to do together with our partners and allies. Our fourth priority is strategic resilience of European economy. It was the COVID pandemic that has shown some weak points in European economy, one-sided dependency on some countries. Europe must be an industrial and technology leader. For that, it is important to have a well-functioning single market without unnecessary obstacles. Only that will boost our European companies. We therefore have to understand the supply chains better and make them as short as possible so that the availability of strategic resources and spare parts is always a matter of certainty. What plays a key role here is boosting free trade with other partners who share our values. The more free trade agreements of quality we have, the more we can diversify our contacts and supply chains. What I consider important is also the digitization and automation in European industry, which also must lead in innovation and new technologies. As far as strategic resilience of European economy is concerned, food security is of utmost importance. Europe has become self-sufficient in food. However, the war in the Ukraine also has its implications on food security, and the European Union must respond. We should not forget about the importance of providing food in all parts of the world, including the most vulnerable ones, not only because destabilizing in the food area would represent a threat to Europe. Ronald Reagan said that freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. The same can be said about democracy. That is why it is so important to have resilient democratic institutions, and that is our fifth and last priority. long-term prosperity and stability of Europe is based on functional democratic mechanisms. Our societies are the targets of attacks by those who have a problem with democracy, with human rights, etc. And we must defend those values. That is why we shall always support and boost the freedoms, fundamental human rights, civil society, free media, as well as independent institutions across Europe. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no doubt that we are facing a difficult time, not only due to the Russian aggression in the Ukraine. We are fighting increasing inflation, ever-increasing energy prices, in some countries rising unemployment, in some countries we're facing the drop in the GDP. We should not therefore forget about those citizens who are bearing the brunt of this socially. We must not forget about those in need. I can reassure you that those are issues that we shall focus on in a systematic way.
Ladies and gentlemen, the 6-month presidency is indeed a short time. However, I can assure you that the Czech Presidency is ready to take its role actively. We are ready to focus on an open dialogue, to seek compromises and functional solutions in cooperation with other EU institutions. I believe that we will be able to deliver our promises. I hope that with our help, Ukraine will soon be on the way to full recovery. I also hope that we will be successful in the fight against inflation, in ensuring energy security, employment, and increasing the competitiveness of our economies. I trust that we will be even stronger than we are now. Ladies and gentlemen, I am convinced that we can count on the help of the European Parliament, which is a pillar of European democracy. We highly value democratic debates on this floor, and I'm looking forward for our debate. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister, for that comprehensive overview and introduction. I give the floor now to the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen.
Vielen Dank.
Thank you, President, Mrs. Metsola, dear Roberta, Prime Minister, dear Peter, ladies and gentlemen, honourable members. We can all bring to mind the images of Russia's invasion of Ukraine when it started. Ukrainian citizens had no weapons and they stood tall against the Russian soldiers, spoke with the soldiers, shouted at them, flagged, quite frankly, how absurd the war was. Those images remind us of a different invasion and another example of resistance against oppression in Prague in '68. We saw unforgettable scenes of peaceful demonstrators taking to the streets of Prague and standing firm against Soviet tanks. And so I cannot imagine a better country, one more suited to taking over the rotating presidency of the Council in the European Union, no better country than the Czech Republic. The Czech people have suffered under oppression, and the people in the Czech Republic know all about resistance, the power of hope, and the joy that comes with free democracy. Now more than ever, we need to strive for freedom, self-determination in the European Union. So, my dear Peter, I look forward to the Czech presidency of the European Union over the next 6 months.
are enormous. You, Petr, have summed them up with 3 words: rethink, repower, rebuild. And of course, the word rebuild calls to mind first and foremost the reconstruction of Ukraine. I've just returned, where I met you also, Petr, from the Lugano Reconstruction Conference. And I think we witnessed a very impressive presentation of Ukraine's reconstruction plan. Representatives from more than over 40 countries and organizations agreed on the Lugano principles. Ukraine-owned, reform-focused, transparency, accountability and rule of law, democratic participation, gender equality and inclusion, and sustainability. And I think these are good principles. Now we have to fill them with life. And for doing that, we need the best and the brightest on reconstruction. And this is why, together with the German G7 presidency, we will convene such a high-level conference after summer, because we all know never ever before have we mastered such a colossal reconstruction challenge, so we need all hands on deck. And while we work in these days to help Ukraine win this war, we must also make sure that Ukraine wins the peace that will for sure come. You, honorable members, were the first to call for the European perspective for Ukraine. And this led to the historic decision to grant Ukraine candidate status. I think we can all take pride in this because our union lived up to the moment. We did exactly what Václav Havel reminded us of in his speech, which also provides the motto for your presidency. He has said, "It is not that the united part of Europe would come to harm if it expanded. Just the opposite. In the long run, it would come to harm only if it failed to expand." And I think in these days, that really sounds like a prophecy. Now, the second task you, the Czech Presidency, identified is repower. The unity and the resolve we show towards Russia will also be key to repower Europe. And this means primarily to push forward the very ambitious agenda of our European Green Deal. Because climate change will not wait till Putin's war is over. And the unprecedented heat wave that recently struck Europe is just the latest reminder of that. Now, I'm very glad that both Parliament and Council have taken their positions on Fit for 55. So now it's up to the Czech Presidency to bring forward the trilogues. And I'm also very grateful for your commitment, dear Petr, to bring forward the Repower EU package. With Repower EU, we are mobilizing substantive new resources for renewable energy. It is a 300 billion euro plan to win independence from Russian fossil fuels, actually from any fossil fuels. And to do so, we are first and foremost diversifying our gas supplies away from Russia towards trustworthy, reliable suppliers. And our efforts are already making a big difference. I have reported several times here in the Parliament about that, so let me update you about what the latest efforts are. Since March, global LNG exports other than Russia to Europe have risen by 75% compared to 2021. And LNG exports from the United States to the European Union have nearly tripled. I think even more important is that at the same time, the average monthly import of Russian pipeline gas to the European Union is now sharply declining by 33% compared to last year. This year, June, minus 33%. So we are making progress, and that's exactly what we wanted to have. But we know that all of this will only work, the diversifying away from Russia and having energy security of supply, if we speed up the transition to renewable energies. This is the key remedy. Now, I observe that some say In the new security environment after Russia's aggression, we have to slow down the green transition. And this transition would come at the cost of basic security, they say. Just the opposite is true. If we do nothing but compete around fossil fuels, the limited fossil fuels that are out there, the prices will just go through the roof and we will fill Putin's war chest. And that's exactly what we do not want to have. And therefore, the best, the cleanest and safest way out of the dependency of fossil fuels are renewables. So, the new security environment is the best argument to speed up deployment of renewables. Renewables are homegrown. They give us independence from Russian fossil fuels. They are more cost efficient and they are cleaner than anything else. So let's take the opportunity and really invest in the renewable energy. Honourable members, but we also need to prepare now for further disruption of gas supply and even a complete cut-up of Russian gas supply. Just to give you a figure, today, 12 member states are already directly affected by partial or total cut-off of Russian gas. So it is obvious Putin continues to use energy as a weapon. And this is why the Commission is working on a European emergency plan. We will present this plan and the necessary instruments by mid-July. Member states have their national contingency plans, that's good. But I think we need European cooperation and we need common action as 27. We need to make sure that in case of full disruption, the gas flows towards where it's needed most. We have to provide for European solidarity. And we need to protect the single market as well as industry supply chains. And here, honourable members, we should never forget the bitter, bitter lesson that we learned at the beginning of the pandemic. You remember it very well. At the beginning, we had egoism and protectionism, closed borders, export bans, you name it. That led only to disunity and fragmentation. But with European unity and coordination, we then, after a while, had the key remedies to overcome this brutal pandemic. So let's keep these principles in mind. As always, let's hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. I know this is hard work ahead of us, but like in the last month, unity will be key to our success. Mesdames et Messieurs les députés.
Honourable members, you know as well as I do that in all member states there are worrying economic trends. The COVID crisis has deepened debt levels, and just when economies were starting to rebound, Russia began a ferocious attack against Ukraine. This accelerated inflation in all sectors, the food sector, the energy sector, and all in between. At the same time, investment is key to ensure a transition, a green, digital, resilient transition. And that is why we need to rethink. Rethink, my dear Peter, is part of your motto, and it is very appropriate. We need to rethink the way we drive growth. We have a very different political and economic context. We know the rules of economic governance. We need rules that recognise our need for investment and the need for healthy budgets. The budgetary viability and indeed growth go hand in hand. We will present the results of our assessment of economic governance during the Czech Presidency. Look at the single market. You talked about this. You talked about our trade relationship. These are two major assets in tackling a crisis, the main drivers of growth. We need to rethink the way we can strengthen those assets further. We need to look at new free trade agreements. One, for example, signed last week with New Zealand. That is a good case in point. The new agreement will help to bring about a 30% increase in trade between the European Union and New Zealand. For the first time, it enshrines unprecedented commitments on social and climate issues. This shows that when democracies are strong, they can deliver results in the interests of their citizens.
In his Aachen speech, Václav Havel spoke about Europe as a task. The task of Europe today, he said, is to rediscover its conscience and its responsibility. It's beautiful. End of quote. And this is exactly what we will continue to do with the support of our Czech friends. Dear Petr, I've seen it with my own eyes and heard what you reported to me when I visited Czechia last week. And thank you again for this wonderful reception. The Czech people opened their hearts and their homes to refugees. They do miracles to thousands and thousands of Ukrainian refugees hosted in the Czech Republic. And this is, in the Havel sense, Europe with a conscience and taking its responsibility. This is Europe at its best. Long live Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Commission President. Before we go to the round of political groups, I have one quick announcement in relation to the decisions by the IMCO and ECON committees to enter into interinstitutional negotiations pursuant to Rule 71, paragraph 1, announced at the opening of the session on Monday 4th. I have received no request for a vote in Parliament by members or political groups reaching at least the medium threshold. The committees may therefore start the negotiations. And now, on behalf of the EPP Group, I invite the Group Chair, Manfred Weber, to take the floor.
Madam President of the European Parliament, European Commission, Mr. Vice President, dear Prime Minister, dear Petr Fiala, welcome and thank you so much for the presentation of the ideas of the Czech Presidency. And the Czech Presidency comes at the right moment. Thanks to you, Europe is first of all back in the Czech government. As soon as you took office, you appointed a Minister for European Affairs next to you, Mr. Beck. For the first time after 12 years, there is again a European minister in the Czech government, and that's why I'm convinced that the Czech Presidency will be a pro-European one, a good one and a successful one. And I also want to underline that with this new presidency, with this new government after the government of Babiš, I think it's also a symbol of rule of law and also a symbol of separation between business interests and public interests. The Czech Presidency comes at the right moment. Ursula von der Leyen reminded us already on the Prague Spring. I want to add the resistance against the Nazi Germany and the peaceful revolution in 1989. The Czech Republic is the symbol that brave and determined fighting for democracy and freedom will be rewarded at the end. The Czech Presidency is the best suited to lead Europe when it comes to support Ukraine for its fight for democracy, freedom and justice. European democracy and freedom are breathing Czech spirit. The Czech Presidency comes at the right moment when it comes to the future of Europe now. We can only survive in confrontation with Putin if Europe is the lighthouse of free democracies in the world. That is why we finally need a convention to renew the idea of European democracy. We must take the people of Europe seriously when it is about European decision-making. The Conference of the Future of Europe made it clear we need to strengthen our democracy. And you spoke about this. The Czech Presidency wants to do so. We must introduce and live the lead candidate principle, that people have a say about who is in the future the Commission President. We must strengthen both the European Parliament and the national parliament. We need a re-parliamentarization of the European Union. The European Parliament should have full rights on legislative initiatives and decide on the EU budget together with the national parliaments. And that's why the Czech Republic can play their key role after the French presidency had some leftovers for you to continue your work. And let me be also clear on this political union idea. I think it's good that we talk to each other, no doubt about this. But for me, it's not yet clear what is the key idea behind this political union. And I have also to say that this was not part of the debate here in Strasbourg in the Future of Europe conference. So it's a new idea. I think we should base our future ideas on the process of listening to people. And finally, the Czech presidency comes at the right moment when we have to focus on the most urgent tasks, and that is about inflation and especially the energy security. As a first step, I support Draghi's initiative to impose a temporary cap on price that the European Union countries are willing to pay for Russian natural gas. Let us use our European economic power against Putin's blackmail attempts. And when the crisis will probably arrive in winter, when Nord Stream 1 will probably not continue to deliver gas, we need a legally binding mechanism of solidarity in the European Union. And I think it's also needed, Mr. Prime Minister, to go for an extraordinary European Council for this. We need decisions. We have to prepare for the crisis and not wait for the crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, the Czech presidency comes at the right moment. You can fully count on your EPP group to deliver. Europe needs your leadership. Europe needs a strong Czech presidency.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weber. And now I invite the leader of the S&D group, Irache Garcia Perez, to take the floor.
Gracias. Thank you very much. Thank you, President. Thank you, President von der Leyen, Prime Minister. We're starting off another complicated presidency now with the war in Ukraine and its consequences. It seems almost as if COVID was relegated to the past, but these are overlapping crises and we have to delve deeper. The 2 years ahead of us in this term are going to be decisive. We know that instability is going to continue, and that's why it's extremely important to stay on course when it comes to the big changes and transitions, the green transition and the digital one, and in order to deal with unexpected turbulence. Prime Minister Fiala, we support the priorities of your program, strengthening freedom, security and prosperity for everyone. We need to manage the refugee crisis, recovery for Ukraine after the war, energy security, and we need to rein in inflation. But we won't be able to do so without taking into account the impact that this will have on people. In other words, social policies. And that is what our group is concerned about. Yesterday, we would have liked more references in your work program to social issues. But today, I'm very pleased that you have taken up our plea to have a social summit in order to make sure that the social policies that we agreed on in Porto last year are brought up to date. This is excellent news, Prime Minister, because we have to make sure that we protect ourselves from external threats, but also from internal threats. We have to make sure that we fight against injustice, inequality and poverty, because these will also be threats jeopardizing the European project. That is why we have to talk about the social impact. And another issue is gender equality, because we have made a lot of progress along this path, but a lot remains to be done. For example, in order to make sure that we have pay equality. It would also be a good gesture if your government ratified the Istanbul Convention, because it is the main legal instrument that we have in order to fight against gender violence. And of course, the rule of law is key, and I very much hope that your presidency will make a difference. Prague is at the geographical heart of Europe. It is the symbol of a people's struggling for democracy and their rights. And I hope that you will be able to plead along these lines in the Visegrad Group. You know that these values are not negotiable, and that the EU cannot renounce defending the rule of law. Now, under the Czech Presidency, the Council can finally organize serious and efficient hearings on how the rule of law situation has deteriorated in Hungary and Poland on the basis of Article 7. And unanimity is not necessary. The only thing that is needed is political will. Authoritarian populism is a threat for Europe and for all its countries, and not all Visegrad governments are the same. We are aware of the fact that Prague now has the opportunity to be leaders when it comes to this new push for freedom, a new democratic spring. We have to listen to citizens in order to do this, and that is why I'm sorry to see that your program doesn't refer to the Conference on the Future of Europe. Citizens are expecting much more, and we have to push forward reforms, and we can only do this if we go beyond unanimity in important areas. We have to tackle the challenge of migration head-on. We cannot waste any more time. The EU has to flesh out the word solidarity. Prime Minister, you chose a slogan that is spot on for your presidency, Europe as a task. This is a quote from Václav Havel. He said this in his speech when he got the Charlemagne Prize, and we still represent a project based on solidarity, a project about the future that we're all building day by day. You can count on the Socialist Group in order to work side by side with you in order to mold this future, this common future based on peace, prosperity, freedom over the next 6 months. Thank you.
Perez, I give the floor on behalf of the Renew Europe Group to Dita Sharansova.
Vážená paní předsedkyně.
Madam President of the European Commission, and Prime Minister, the Czech Presidency is starting at an extremely difficult time, continuing war in the Ukraine, uncertainty about future development, as well as the deteriorating economic and social situation in Europe. I personally welcome the steps that the Czech Republic, the Czech Presidency, is planning vis-à-vis the Ukraine. Support to the Ukraine is of key importance for the safety and security of all Europe. However, the center point of the whole presidency must be the citizen. The citizens should not be the last, as mentioned in your speech, but rather first. They should come first. Hand in hand with the Ukrainian crisis, you need to acutely deal with providing sufficient energy for this winter to the citizens as well as companies, how to unblock Ukrainian ports to prevent further crisis and influx of refugees, how to maintain the competitiveness of Europe in ever-increasing inflation and energy prices. Czechia must become a crisis manager with a crisis plan for Europe. Prime Minister, when you ask in Brussels about the first Czech presidency dating back to 2009 that I took part in, most people will remember the peculiar Czech sense of humor that you are well familiar with. And the world media, however, concluded by saying that we had excellent officials and diplomats, but bad politicians. You have an opportunity to improve the image of the Czech Republic, and it's an opportunity not to be missed.
Thank you, Ms. Sharansova. Next, on behalf of the Green Group, Jordi Solé.
Thank you, Madam President, Madam Commission President, Vice President, dear Prime Minister. You are taking over the presidency of the Council in challenging times. This is beyond doubt. One of these big challenges is our dependency on fossil fuels. You mentioned that environmentally, but also geopolitically, we are paying a high price for this dependency. Turning towards a green economy is key to tackle our climate challenges, but also to get rid of very inconvenient dependencies, as we see these days, and this should be the Council's presidency goal too. We have to be not only ambitious, but also consistent. And this is clearly not the case with the taxonomy proposal. This proposal doesn't live up to our ambitions, but also doesn't live up to the consistency of our policies for climate neutrality. That's why I hope later today this Parliament will vote down this proposal. Prime Minister, there are reforms like energy transition that we can undertake under the current treaties, but others demand treaty changes. In that sense, I must say that I regret that the Czech government is one of the signatories rejecting the possibility to change the treaties. As you know very well, this Parliament is indeed pushing for a convention to amend the treaties, and I hope that the Council activates Article 48, the sooner the better. Our demand is also in line with the Conference on the Future of Europe conclusions, which, amongst other things, asked for putting an end to national vetoes. And I hope you will help implementing what European citizens ask us to do. And finally, I welcome that the program of your presidency includes efforts towards advancing negotiations on the Pact on Migration and Asylum. It is high time to close this deal. We urgently need a migration and asylum policy that strikes a fair balance between our demographic and economic needs, the need for solidarity between member states, and the need to put fundamental rights at the forefront. I ask you, Prime Minister, to work in this direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Solé. And now I invite the chair of the ID group, Marco Zanni, to take the floor. Prego.
Grazie. Thank you very much, President. President von der Leyen, Vice President, Prime Minister. I already had an opportunity to speak to you a couple of weeks ago, and it was a very useful debate, and I'd like to wish you the very best of luck for your work. You and your country are managing the presidency of the Council at one of the most critical moments that this continent has had to face. It's critical from an external point of view, with the war in Ukraine, but also at the internal level. You and your colleagues have listed many of the problems that our citizens within the European Union are facing with a great deal of difficulty. We share the priorities of your ambitious program that the Czech Presidency has sketched out for the next 6 months. But now we need acts. Citizens need facts. They need decisions. We have spent much too much time over the last few months. Okay, I mean, I understand that the situation was difficult, but we have been trying too hard to try and take the decisions, whereas we still need answers on the war. As long as we are not able to put an end to this war, inflation will not fall, energy prices will not fall, and we will not manage to save the Ukrainian people. And nor will we be able to save the peoples of our own countries, our own citizens. So that's why we need to act. We need to protect and defend Ukraine with the final objective of having as early a peace as possible. That's what Ukraine's citizens want, and that's what Europe's citizens want. On the economy, I've said it before and I'll say it again. The European institutions haven't done enough. Now we need strong exceptional measures because the situation is dramatic. Energy bills have been multiplied 5-fold. Companies are not managing to balance their accounts at the end of the month. The economic prospects are bleaker than they have been for a long time. We need to act now. President Weber, you reminded us of the proposal that the Italian government put on the table at the last council. The longer we wait before we put a price ceiling on gas supplies, the more money we'll be giving to Russia, the more possibility we'll be giving the Russians to hold us in blackmail with their gas supplies. I think the Polish Prime Minister made a good proposal. Let's also put a ceiling on the CO2 price under the ETS scheme. I don't agree when the European institutions say that the green transition is not having an impact on energy prices, that the green transition isn't part of the problem. It's not me that's saying, it's the European Central Bank. They officially confirmed repeatedly over the last few months that inflationary pressure is also being caused by some of the policies that are being pursued. We need pragmatism. We need concrete decisions, because otherwise we will not be able to speak to our citizens. We will not be able to understand or allow our citizens to understand how important it is for us to act together.
On behalf of the ECR Group, Veronika Vrecionová.
Madam President of the European Parliament, Madam President of the European Commission, Prime Minister Fiala, allow me to thank you for presenting the plans of the Czech Presidency. I believe that these fully correspond to the problems Europe needs to face. It is self-evident that there are two topics of the utmost importance. Both are connected to Ukraine. First of all, a post-war reconstruction of Ukraine, because a functioning and prosperous country on the eastern borders of the EU is important, not just for Ukrainians themselves, but also for us, the member states of the EU. Approving Ukrainians' candidate status is a good first step in this regard. Now we need to come up with specific reconstruction plans. Promises of help that we're hearing left and right need to materialize in bank accounts that will pay for this reconstruction. The current energy crisis is also a topic that connects back to Ukraine. What is happening is the very thing that we have been warning against. How many times did we talk about the risks of completing Nord Stream 2? Now we have to very quickly work on providing enough energy for our citizens at a reasonable price. We have to stop lying to ourselves that we'll be able to pick and choose the energy resources that we like and that we regard to be green or less green. Our main task is now to mobilize all resources available, at least in the short as well as in the mid-term. We're seeing this happening in Germany already. For example, which is increasing the percentage of energy out of dirty coal, where it has the option to use clean nuclear energy. We need to use nuclear energy. We need to develop new modular reactor types. Today at noon, we'll be voting on the objection to the taxonomy. In this vote, we will see who is really interested in our citizens that they represent here. We will see who is interested in how citizens will charge their electric cars, how they will turn on their lights, how they will provide heating, because without nuclear power, we will not prevail. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Vrecionová. Next, on behalf of the Left Group, Katarina Konečná.
Thank you, Madam President. Ladies and gentlemen, Prime Minister. It is a rare occurrence to agree with something prepared by the Czech right-wing government of Petr Fiala. I may surprise a lot of you, but out of the 5 presidency priorities, I consider 4 to be correct. The problem, however, is elsewhere. The reality is often tougher than the eloquent words of the Czech government. It is unrelenting only in seeing that the Czech Republic is assisting in the cancellation of the veto right for member states. It forces Czech citizens to purchase energy with a surcharge, even though it's been produced cheaply. The Czech wages being 1/3 of the Western wages often have to pay higher prices for everything. The Czech idea of cybersecurity is just switching off the website websites that they're not comfortable with without a court ruling. And it is on the road to privatizing the remainders of government-owned companies, and price increases are more than double than in the rest of the EU. And the program for the Czech citizens is bad, as well as leaving companies to its own devices with banning combustion engines. The corruption scandals among government officials is rampant. I wish that we are not treated as the Czech citizens by the Czech government. What the Czech Republic needs, and especially during its presidency, it needs a government where the citizen comes first, rather than excuses and empty promises. Not by words, but by deeds shall you know them. Good luck, not only to the Czech government, but to everybody.
Thank you, Ms. Konečná. And now, on behalf of the non-attached members, Balázs Hidvégi.
Köszönöm a szót, elnök asszony. Tisztelt miniszterelnök!
Thank you very much, Prime Minister, President. The Czech presidency comes at a time when we are facing economic and security challenges that are unprecedented. We haven't had these kind of challenges for centuries, for decades rather, and we have to stand united. We need common sense, and we need a long-term vision. It's extremely important to focus on the real problems, so we want to ask the Czech presidency to help us in order to make sure that all members, Hungary and Poland, can tap into the financial resources that have been earmarked for them. These are countries that are dealing with the lion's share of the refugees in an unprecedented crisis in Europe, at the same time as we're facing very serious economic and energy crises. The issue of security of energy supply isn't ideological but physical. Do we have the energy sources or not? We hope that the Czech presidency will be emphasizing the importance of security of energy supply, and our main task is to help its citizens, families and businesses. Thank you.
Hidvégi, and now I give the floor back to Prime Minister Fiala to respond to the first round.
Dámy a pánové, děkuji vám.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your contributions, for your questions, for your interest in the Czech presidency, and of course, thank you very much for all your words of support that we've heard here this morning. When I introduced our presidency's themes, I told you that we chose several key aspects. Our 5 priorities, of course, include a wider range of topics, which in some cases are already within the long-term agenda of the EU. Of course, the Czech presidency is further developing these. There is a document on the planning of individual policy sectors, and please read that document. It is available on our presidency's website. You will see that many of the topics that you say you didn't hear in my presentation, you will find in that document. I didn't mention them here for time's sake. So thank you very much for all that you've said. I'll try to respond to several specific questions that were voiced here today. I believe that from the speakers' interventions, it is very clear how every one of us realizes the major challenges and risks that we are facing in the EU today. In most of your contributions, you've said that you want clear steps, common steps, courageous steps being taken by the EU to remember the citizens who are facing repercussions of the war in Ukraine and all of the rest of the aspects that I've mentioned in my speech and that Madam von der Leyen mentioned in her speech. At one point, I was slightly worried that Our unity is such that even the communists would say, well done to me, but I'm reassured that they didn't in the end. And this rather showed me that we were heading in the right direction. Now, to the specific questions. The conference on the future of the EU. This was mentioned by Mr. Weber. It was mentioned by several others. The Czech Republic is, of course, fully committed to engage in implementing the outputs of the Conference on the Future of the EU. We do realize that there is an interest in the European Parliament to call a convention and to initiate the procedure on changing the European treaties. But I have to say that this is indeed a marathon. I would like to correct one thing that I've heard from Mr. Solé, I believe. We are not in principle against a debate on changing the treaties, but we are convinced that this will be a long-term exercise. And first of all, we need to have proper debate so that we be prepared for an in-depth discussion on changing the treaties as such. It will need time. As our feasibility study says on the implementation of the outputs of the Conference on the Future of the EU, the documents of the European Commission clearly say that even within the current legal framework, we can implement a large number of proposals from the Conference on the Future of the EU. We can concentrate on that, but calling a convention and initiating a treaty change cannot be done hastily. It could hamper any implementation of anything else that came out of the Conference on the Future of the EU. So we do not try to avoid institutional questions. We want to tread wisely so that we attain those changes that the EU citizens indeed wish for. Several of you, or rather to be very specific, it was Madam Garcia and several others, have mentioned how important it was to reflect the social dimension, the social policy of our presidency. I must say that in many of our priorities, there is a social dimension already there. Speaking about available energy, energy at a reasonable price, energy security, all of these have a social dimension. Or we can speak about European economy resilience, about how we make sure that we are not as dependent on resources from certain producers on certain products that we then keep further processing in the EU. That also has a social dimension. We're talking about employment and about all of those other things that touch day-to-day citizens' lives in the EU. So there is a social dimension in our policy. So we do not perceive this as a separate area of our presidency. It is fully integrated into our overall agenda. We're also speaking about the need to rebalance between environmental measures, the social aspect, and our economy. That will be the major task of the next months. And here we need to face our challenges, because if we only focus on one aspect without rebalancing it with the other aspects, if we give one of them priority, what we can expect is a disruption in our social peace, and that's what nobody wants. To be very specific, because the questions on the social aspects have been voiced, I can tell you that we were preparing several conferences on this topic in Prague. Energy poverty, on that there will be a conference on the 24th of October. Integrating handicapped persons, persons with disabilities, there will be a conference on the 20th and the 21st of September. And fighting child poverty, there will be a conference on that at the beginning of July, in the next few days. So we are even focusing on these aspects. These are examples of specific actions that the Czech presidency will undertake. They are under preparation, and they will deal with the questions that you've mentioned. I agree that we need to be strong and specific in energy, economy, and many other aspects. And I do not share the skepticism saying that we are not able to do this, we are not willing to do this. So the ETS was mentioned, yes, and this is a long-term problem. Many countries are happy with how the ETS works. Many countries are unhappy. And sometimes we're seeing major problems, for example, in the Czech Republic. But lately, we've been able to achieve a certain compromise in the sense that we will emit more allowances on the market so that the price not increase so much. I believe this is one example of what we can do if we want to achieve a reasonable compromise that everybody can then, in the end, support. We have to remember that, for example, as far as energy is concerned, and please do remember this, for me, one of the greatest, or how shall I say, the best things in this awful tragedy that the war in Ukraine undoubtedly is, and given all the consequences, given all the repercussions, one of the best things that could happen to us in the EU, and I'm seeing this in council meetings, is that we've learned to listen to one another. We've learned to listen, be it from the West, being from the South, listening to Central and Eastern European countries, which have experience with Russian imperialism and which do recognize the threat that we're seeing from Russia. We, in turn, have learned to listen to our southern member states who have their particular problems with addressing issues stemming from North Africa, etc. This listening to one another is extremely important, but we have to take one another seriously as well as far as energy is concerned. There are countries in the EU that have an energy mix where they are independent of Russia. Then there are countries, on the other hand, which are extremely dependent on Russia. For example, in case of the Czech Republic, we are 97% dependent on Russian gas. Getting rid of this dependency is our task number one, but it will take several months or maybe even several years to achieve this. To achieve it, we need solidarity from everybody else. There are countries which can rely on renewable energy sources. They've done a tremendous amount of work, and now, today, they are miles ahead of other countries who have not done their homework, maybe we can even call it their mistake, but they simply do not have natural conditions so that they may use renewable energy sources, and their energy mix needs need to be reflected. And I repeat, this is the Czech Republic, but several other states as well. If we are unable to finance nuclear energy as a clean energy source, those countries will not be able to meet their climate goals. They will not be able to get rid of their dependency on Russia. Let us remember that. Our initial conditions, our natural conditions, and many other things make us diverse. And what we have to try to do is, when meeting our common goals, we have to be able to find different paths and respect the paths that individual countries wish to take. Let us all please remember this. I'm sure we all agree on our overall goals. Achieving those goals, especially in exceptional times, exceptionally hard times like these, that can only be attained if we create a certain level of freedom for decision-making in individual member states. If we respect the diverse speeds at which individual countries want to achieve these goals. If we do not approach this in a diversified way, the results cannot be good. And my last remark, I just have to say this, I'm sorry. Someone mentioned that in my speech, citizens came last. I believe it was a Czech colleague who mentioned this. That is not true. Citizens came first. My entire speech was about EU citizens. In all our priorities, we remember the citizens. If we cannot manage the refugee crisis, if we cannot manage to help Ukraine, to stop Russian aggression, who will pay the price? Our citizens. You mentioned food. You mentioned the food corridors. You also mentioned the word, inevitably, Ukraine. Yes, it is all very narrowly tied together. That is how important Ukraine, that is how supporting Ukraine is important for us. We have to do our utmost that Ukraine win. Ukraine is connected with anything that we may discuss here today, and you mentioned this, Ms. Charanzová, yourself. Speaking about energy self-sufficiency, speaking about trying to have energy at a reasonable price. What are we talking about? We're talking about citizens. Resilience of European economy also has a social dimension. Reinforcing defense capabilities in Europe, that has a social dimension. That is all about our citizens. Resilience of democratic institutions. Of course, even here, who else is a democratic institution than the citizen? So the citizen and their well-being are very dear to us across all our priorities. Thank you very much once more for all your questions. I hope I've answered most of them.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We continue with the speeches of the different colleagues, starting with Michaela Sojdrova for 1 minute and a half.
Děkuji, vážená paní předsedkyně.
Thank you, Madam President, Prime Minister. I'm frankly very happy to see that it is you whom I can welcome this morning. The priority of the Czech Presidency reflects reality. If we want to preserve our freedom and our safety, we have no other choice. The help to the Ukraine in the fight for freedom and independence using all means available, including support to Ukrainian refugees. There are no other priorities than the independence from Russian energy sources and strengthening defense capabilities. We need to support social cohesion, food security, and we must preserve the citizens' trust. And I'm happy to see that you're facing these challenges with courage. And I thank you, Prime Minister, that you lead by example in solidarity with Ukraine. And I would like to thank the Czech citizens that we lead by example in helping and integrating Ukrainian refugees. Europe has set itself ambitious objectives in fighting climate change. Not that we would be naive thinking that we'll save the world on our own, but we want to lead by example, showing others like China, Brazil and others that they can join us in the effort. And here I believe the Czech Presidency will play an important role. And I wanted to ask you a question on this. Are you ready to finalize negotiations on the legislative package in that matter? And do you think it's realistic to achieve the objectives for climate neutrality and at the same time become independent from Russian sources? But I believe that question has become superfluous because you have spoken clearly on this. Let me only emphasize that I want to wish you and your presidency lots of strength. Now Europe needs concrete actions. Europe is our common task. Thank you.
Now I give the floor to Radka Maxová for 1 minute.
Děkuji za slovo, vážená.
Thank you very much, Madam President, Prime Minister, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues.
A velký úkol nás opravdu čeká v těžké době. Evropská unie bude čelit těžkým výzvám.
There is a great task ahead of us. The EU is facing many challenges: the war in Ukraine, inflation, pandemic. The Czech Republic has been stressing cooperation and unity when dealing with these tasks. We need to be united when solving social questions, protecting the vulnerable, assuring fair opportunities, fighting violence. Apart from the crises that you have mentioned in your speech, I would also like to draw your attention to things that you have not mentioned in the Czech Presidency's priorities. We're seeing a mental health crisis. Apart from the obvious impact on people's lives, we're also seeing the price of more than 4% of our GDP. Challenging times require us to take bold steps in protecting citizens' mental health. Please make sure mental health is protected, because inactivity can cost us up to 80,000 lives per annum, lives which we would lose in Europe as a result of mental problems. The second issue I would like to mention is wage transparency. Women still earn less than men in the EU, and this will be a great challenge for the EU presidency to manage the trilogues for pay transparency. Believe me that we as the Socialists and Democrats will wish you all the best, but at the same time we will make sure that you will not overlook our social problems. Thank you.
Marie-Pierre Vedren for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam President, Vice President, Prime Minister. As you yourself said, the French presidency of the Council of the European Union saw historic steps taken to build a strong Europe. A Europe that is a climate powerhouse thanks to positions adopted on the climate package. Social and educational powerhouse with the agreement on a minimum wage in all member states. A strengthened and less naive trading powerhouse. A digital powerhouse setting global standards regulating platforms. And above all, a geopolitical powerhouse standing by Ukraine and neighbouring democracies as they fight for freedom against Russia. You can build on this excellent record. Your presidency comes at a key juncture. What is at stake is a need to hold the course, remain united. We don't need unanimity, but we should stand united. We need to complete negotiations on the climate package, finalise the agreement on due diligence and tools to counter the use of economic coercion. Parliament is resolute working to this end. We need that same commitment from you to work in the interests of all Europeans. I wish you every success during your presidency.
For 1 minute, Daniel Freund.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear Mr. Fiala, you promised your voters that you will kick out the corrupt, that you will defend the rule of law. And you won against Andrej Babiš. Now you're taking over the presidency of the Council, and I'm sure you know that corruption is not only an issue in the Czech Republic, but in the entire EU. Where Babiš tried to prevent justice, the Polish government is trying to take over the entire justice system. And where Babiš took millions, Orban and his cronies are taking billions, not just millions. Autocrats are the biggest threat to the EU, and I'm very thankful that you're taking the autocrat that is invading our neighbor Ukraine very seriously. But I think you need to take those following the Putin playbook inside the EU equally seriously. It's up to you to set this on the agenda and to make sure that the attacks on the democracy and rule of law by the Hungarian government play a role in your presidency, and the decision of freezing funds to Hungary will come to the table of your presidency. Make sure that the promise you gave to your voters doesn't stop at the Czech border and that you're delivering on that promise also in your presidency. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Freund. Next is Dominik Tarczyński for 1 minute.
Madam President, Prime Minister, first of all, I'd like to thank you, Prime Minister, for your bravery. I'd like to thank you for your presence in Kiev with Mr. Kaczynski and Mr. Morawiecki. That's very important to everyone in Europe, I believe. So I'd like to thank you for your bravery. And for your presidency, I'd like to wish you bravery, because it's needed. So I hope you will stay strong, because it's up to you, up to your perseverance, what is going to happen now in Europe. We do remember 1968, when Soviets invaded your country. And I can assure you now, you have our full support, because we do know how it is to be a slave of the Soviet Union and Russia. So I can assure you, Poland will never be a slave of the Soviets. Poland will never be a slave of the Soviet Union and Russia. And I do believe that Czech Republic will never be a slave And this is my wishes to you and to your people. Stay strong, stay firm. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Johan Radesh Bogdan for 1 minute.
Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, the Czech Republic has been a member of the EU since May 2007 and since 2007 member state of Schengen. Václav Havel said that oil should not be more important than human rights or rights of nations. Romania has been a member of the EU since January 2007. 4 years later, it had met all the conditions to join Schengen. Now it's 2022, but we're still waiting. For 11 years, Romanians have been kept at the door of an exclusivist club, the most loyal people in the EU, the most Euro-optimism, has undergone a lot of suffering and is now treated with indifference. We are denied the right to full freedom, culturally and historically, but also politically. Why do we wonder that there are political movements that go against the Euro system? Europe has been shaken by the war in Ukraine, should learn that indifference has its price. It allowed the Crimea to be annexed, and now this attack on Ukraine. Romania is not in danger, thank God, but we are because we are members of EU and NATO. But there's another danger, that Romanians keep leaving their country because it's considered a second-class country. It's not fair, it's not moral, it's not democratic. When the rules are applied with discretion, this is not a democracy. And my question is, when will Romania truly be a priority for the EU? This is unacceptable.
Next is Helen Fritzon for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, President, Commissioner, Prime Minister. Now, the three presidencies, France, Czech Republic and Sweden, are going to be working for greater equality. I'm pleased to hear that, but nevertheless, I'm concerned that equality issues were not identified as a clear priority for the Czech presidency. Threats to equality and women's human rights are very serious. The pandemic has led to an increase in violence against women. Abortion rights are in danger in the United States, but also in the EU. It will take 3 generations at this rate before the EU is an equal union. So, Prime Minister, when does the Czech government plan to ratify the Istanbul Convention? How can you ensure that the EU as a whole does the same? And what will be the major equality priorities under the coming semester?
Microphone. Wait, Ms. Beer. A microphone. Okay.
Okay. Herr Ministerpräsident.
Prime Minister, this could not be more appropriate. The European Union and its future is in good hands with the Czech Republic. The Czech Republic is in favour of enlargement. Prague can liaise between East and West and ensure resilience, bolster resilience. The Eastern Partnership bears the stamp of the Czech Republic. Dating back to 2009, you opened the door for dialogue between the EU and Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Moldova and Ukraine. That courage and foresightedness is needed now. The European Union needs to redefine itself, look at its common energy policy, greater independence, but also internally we need to get our own house in order, ensure that we can take swifter decisions. These reforms are needed in the European Union. Urgently, the Czech Republic cannot slam on the brakes. Rethink, rebuild, repower, that is needed for the European Union itself. Czech Republic needs to drive that forward, be the driving force that the European Union needs. Thank you.
Ms. Marcel Colaya for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear Commissioner, dear Prime Minister, dear Minister, dear colleagues. The Czech Government and the Czech permanent representation to the Union worked tirelessly to get ready for the presidency of the Council, and I would like to thank for that. It is only natural that the presidency's priorities react to the Russian aggression in Ukraine and its implications. Therefore, I believe that the presidency's priorities are well identified. At the same time, other urgent problems, such as the climate emergency, did not magically disappear. They are also reflected in the presidency's priorities, and I'm really happy that the Czech government, under your leadership, Prime Minister, supports Fit for 55 and agrees that only zero-emission cars can be sold on the European market from 2035. And here comes my main question, Prime Minister. What is your measurable goal for Fit for 55? How many legislative acts do you plan to finalize in the negotiations by the end of the presidency? And please let me finish by reiterating how important the presidency's program is. It is an important signal to Europe that Czechia, after years at the periphery, is back at the core of the European project. That Czechia is again dedicated to a strong, safe and united Europe. And last but not least, it is also a very important signal to us in this Parliament that voices of members of the European Parliament from your political group, who are, as a matter of fact, not overly present in this debate, are not the voice of the Czech government. Thank you, and I wish you and us great success in our presidency. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Colaya. Next is Dolores Montserrat for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Madam President. We would like to welcome the Czech Presidency. We have three main challenges in the EU: unity vis-à-vis Putin and supporting Ukraine, and preparing ourselves to rebuild a destroyed country, and to end dependence, energy dependence on Russia. And we have to make sure that we put an end to the destabilization of our European democracies and fight against disinformation. We have to fight against rampant inflation. We have to ask countries to reduce taxes so that we don't have the country filling its coffers, but while citizens, households and businesses going bankrupt, not having enough money to make ends meet. And we need quick disbursement of European funds, and we have to make sure that Europe leads the world on the global stage. It's about political relations, trade relations in Latin America and Africa. We have to fight against China, that is stronger and stronger on these stages. We can't just play second fiddle. There's populism and communism in Cuba, Venezuela and other countries. Let us be ambitious and let us rise to the occasion.
Marek Belka for 1 minute.
Pani Przewodnicząca, Panie Premierze.
President, Prime Minister, Commission, what Václav Havel said, seeing Europe as a task, was absolutely right. The next few months will be a very difficult task for us to fulfill. We have to ensure that we have unity. We should not only be struggling against Russian aggression, but we have to be rebuilding our economy. Strategic autonomy has to be built up, and we have to ensure independence from Russian energy. That is the task of the Czech presidency. Also, looking at the macro-financial rules, we need to have a look at this carefully, and this will be a task for the Czech presidency. Member states have to deal with their own problems, first of all. Poland and the Czech Republic know a famous singer who talked about, with a famous song about 4,000 problems. But in this institution, you have friends. We will be supporting you in this task. Europe is a task that we have to fulfill together.
Yes, Prime Minister, you said here in your intervention that the reform of the European Union and the change of the treaties is a long-term exercise. That's true, but if it is a long-term exercise, you have to start early. Certainly to be ready for 2024. And As you know, the President of the Parliament has triggered Article 48. I sent you a letter, and my request to you and the request of the whole Parliament is that you react smoothly and swiftly to that request. It's a limited request to end unanimity and the national vetoes in the European Council. Because the war in Ukraine shows very well that that is the problem in the European Union for the moment. We need 3 months to have an oil embargo in the European Union. 3 months to decide that because of national vetoes. We have no agreement now on this minimum taxation, a multilateral agreement in an international framework because of the blackmail and the veto of whom? Of Hungary. And at the same time, we have the whole migration package in limbo because of what? Of national vetoes. So the war is showing that that need to change. So my request to you is to smoothly say yes to the request of the Parliament to have a convention. And not to play games about that, Minister. Like yesterday, preparing a letter with the other member states, with a silent procedure, in saying, yeah, but we wait for a more bold proposal of the Parliament or Article 48. So the Council is now saying we cannot say yes to the limited proposal because they asked for a bold proposal. That's playing games, Minister. Say yes to what the President of the Parliament has asked for. Don't only use the words of Havel. Act as Václav Havel.
Thank you, Mr. Verhofstadt. Next is Gwendoline Delbos-Corfield for 1 minute.
Prime Minister, I am now going to, which I do every new Council presidency, because this procedure is now in your hands and we have to rely on you to make things happen. It was 4 years ago that this European Parliament launched Article 7.1 of the treaties against the Hungarian government about the situation of democracy, of rights and of freedom in that member states. And since then, we have been working tirelessly with EU presidencies, all EU presidencies, to get the Council to move forward. Every time you delay the procedures, not only are you giving the Hungarian government more leverage to dismantle the rule of law in their own country, but you are allowing them to threaten the whole European project. We count on the Czech Presidency to be one of those that show leadership and are breaking this cycle of inertia and lack of courage.
Thank you, Ms. Delbos-Corfield. Next is Ludek Niedermayer for 1 minute and a half.
Vážená paní předsedkyně, pane místo...
Madam President, Prime Minister, your speech marked an excellent beginning of the Czech presidency. I appreciate your call for unity and consensus because that's what we rely on in the European Union. I appreciate the references made to Václav Havel, and Europe as a task is a well-chosen motto. What I consider to be the tasks of essential importance. First, a strong position against Russia's aggression to the Ukraine and be ready for the gas to stop. The second priority I consider to be finalize the trialogues. Our companies as well as citizens need to be clear about our policies and objectives, especially finalizing the key files in Fit for 55. I hope you'll succeed in that. And in order to be successful, indeed, we need to be able to listen to one another and to seek appropriate compromise where needed. And that's the way the Parliament works. We should not forget, however, that these compromises need to be explained to our citizens, explain them why it's good not only for the Czechs, but for Estonians, Austrians and all the Europeans. That's the only way to maintain support and also achieving our objectives. Thank you. I wish you every success.
Next is Sophie Intveld for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Prime Minister, 3 points. First of all, on migration. The Council, for years now, aims for a minimal and incomplete package that is best summarized as Fortress Europe, whereas the European Parliament wants a coherent package that will allow us to actually manage migration. Now, we have asked the Council to commit, together with the European Parliament, to take the entire package across the finish line before the European elections, but the Council is hesitating. Will you here commit, together with the European Parliament, to finalising this package before the elections? Secondly, I agree with Guy Verhofstadt. You said on treaty change, oh, we need to go slowly, slowly. But the world is changing at a dizzying speed, and Europe is lagging behind. Intergovernmental Europe is spectacularly ill-equipped to deal with crises or to have a coherent vision for the future. This European governance system is dangerously weak and outdated. And the European Council is becoming a threat to the future of the European Union if you keep blocking reforms. You have a responsibility to the citizens and not to national governments. I expect you to act in the interest of the future of Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. in 't Veld, we have multiple requests for Catch the Eye. I will distribute them across the political groups, starting with Stelios Kimperopoulos.
Thank you very much, President. You have very substantial priorities for your presidency, because it's true that Europe has an unprecedented challenge with the war of aggression in Ukraine, and it also comes close on the heels of another unprecedented crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic. So we have to tackle all of this, and I'm very happy to see that your priorities include the issue of rare diseases as one of the pillars. And this comes at a time when, during your presidency, we will start negotiations on health-related issues, such as the overhaul of the legislation on orphan drugs. The EU has to be at the heart of innovation in order to make sure that we are trailblazers when it comes to developments, and so that we can also manufacture here on European soil, because this affects the quality of life of our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. President, dear Roberta, my thanks to the Czech Prime Minister for his presentation. I would echo what other MEPs have said. It is important for Parliament that we see progress on institutional matters that perhaps did not get much of a mention during the presentation. I, however, have every faith in the ability of the Czech Presidency to steer debate in the Council as requested by Parliament, and triggering Article 48 as requested in our resolution last month, so that the Council can start to assess our proposals, begin discussions, take note of our resolution. Let there be no doubt or confusion here. Help us to take forward the important work on the new European electoral law, including the introduction of a new European constituency.
Ruiz de Veza, next is Jordi Cañas.
Thank you very much, President. The Czech presidency priorities include making progress when it comes to the negotiations, free trade agreements with third countries, including Latin America and in the Indo-Pacific. That's a very good idea, very convenient, given that all of this was paralyzed during the French presidency. But I was very surprised to see that, given that this will play a key role in the future of Europe, referring to the trade chapter, because we need more markets and more suppliers, I was very surprised. I was taken aback that you didn't mention this this in your speech. You have completely forgotten about the trade chapter. So I am startled. I would like to believe that you're going to really push forward the ratification of these trade agreements and that you will kickstart what stalled back in 2019 because some member states threw a spanner in the works. So I would really like your reassurance that you will breathe new life into the ratification of all these outstanding trade agreements with Latin America. Thank you.
Joachim Brudziński.
Dziękuję, Pani Przewodnicząca. Panie Premierze, Europa jako zadanie. Jak ważne to zadanie?
Thank you very much. Well, Europe is a task. That's a difficult task indeed. This debate has showed that to all of us. I would like to thank you very much for your calm and your voice of reason. You have referred to our experiences, the experiences of Central and Eastern Europe, including our experiences with Russia. Now, I would like to respond to what Guy Verhofstadt said. He's trying to teach you lessons, it seems. Well, when it comes to knowledge about the Czech Republic and Poland, I don't think that anyone beats us. Some people say that Putin's a Democrat. Well, please wake up. Listen to the voices of reason who know better than you, who know what makes Putin tick. President Macron and Chancellor Scholz were on the phone when you were in the Ukraine.
Thank you, Madam President. Prime Minister, I like to start by saying that I really appreciate the priorities of the Czech Republic and I wish you the best of luck. Coming from Romania, I know your country very well. I was a child when in 1968 your country was invaded by Russia and I was very happy when my parents were actually grieving together with the Czechs. But Prime Minister, you talked about solutions here, talked about reasonable solutions to solve your priorities. One of them is the internal market. You mentioned it yourself. It is fragmented, Prime Minister. I am Vice President of the Committee on the Internal Market, and I've been working on this topic for 16 presidencies. You are the 17th. We cannot have Schengen and non-Schengen. We cannot have second-class citizens. And please, Prime Minister, do not disappoint me like the French presidency did, because my country meets the technical requirements since 2011. This Parliament had voted on multiple times on Romania entering the Schengen area. So please, Prime Minister, complete your priorities with the union of the internal market without having two internal markets, Schengen and non-Schengen. Thank you so much.
Floor on behalf of the Commission to Vice President Šefčovič.
Dear President, dear Prime Minister, honorable members of the European Parliament, allow me to address you in my mother tongue. Because Czechs for Slovaks will forever be brothers a bratia nepotrebujú tlmočenie. Vážený pán premiér, veľmi dobre ste popísali obrovskú...
Thank you. Now, there was a description of our hopes and what the similarities with the Prague Spring. We know that hopes came back years later with the Velvet Revolution. It brought back democracy to Central Europe, and it also brought back Central Europe into the heart of Europe. There are so many parallels with what is happening today in Ukraine, and that is why we understand Ukraine so well. We really can put ourselves in the shoes of Ukraine, and that is why you have provided such strong support. I'm sure you've been able to draw conclusions from the debate, and that is that your 5 priorities were good choices. And that is because you have really prepared very well in the run-up to your presidency. We're talking about really hard work, which led to tweaking the priorities because of Russian aggression in Ukraine and the changes on the world stage. We're going to continue working hand in glove on many fronts. First of all, we'll be working together when it comes to the conclusions of the Lugano conference and the recovery plan for Ukraine. The Czech Presidency, but also the different member states, have a lot of experience that they've garnered when it comes to enlargement, and we can share this experience with Moldova, Ukraine, and Georgia and the Western Balkans. Security of energy supply is going to be another important plank. The EU is going to have to focus on this. We know that we need crystal clear rules that can make sure that there is solidarity among member states against this very difficult backdrop. There is no doubt about the fact that we'll be learning our lessons from the first months of the COVID pandemic. On the 20th of July, we'll be working on our specific proposal, and we're going to continue improving this within the Council and with the Presidency and the European Parliament.
To the Fit for 55, because here indeed the timing is of essence. The urgency is clear. Just this week we have seen the terrible melting of glaciers in Marmolata, heat waves and fires in Spain, I would say across Europe. And if you look at the calendar, 2030 is indeed around the corner. Therefore, I would like to reassure you that we will have all support we can provide you with for the trilogues with the European Parliament, because now the positions, general approaches are approved. Votes in European Parliament took place, so now we have to work on the compromise to make Fit for 55 happen. I also would like to agree with you, Mr. Prime Minister, that what we need is to strengthen strategic resilience of the European economy and to work on technological and industrial leadership of Europe. And part of strong economy is strong economic governance. And therefore, our plan is that already in the second half of this year, we will work on new, strong economic governance framework. We will provide the orientation on possible changes to the economic governance of today after summer break, so it would be well in time prepared for 2023. And we plan, together with the Czech Presidency, to foster consensus where we can find the best possible solutions, how to deal with the debt sustainability, how to make sure that we will work on sustainable growth through investments and reforms. Vážený pán premiér, speaking about the conference on future of Europe, I would like to reassure the honourable members that the concrete follow-up by the Commission will be presented to you in the first speech of the President of the European Commission in September, in her address on the State of the Union, and immediately the follow-up would be worked in the next Commission work programme. And if it comes to the Convention, once the decision is taken, the Commission will play its role to make Europe stronger and better in the future. Pán premiér, za motto českého predsedníctva ste zvolili.
Now, the Czech Presidency slogan is based on a quote from Havel, Europe as a task. I firmly believe that the Czech Republic is going to manage this very successfully. And we're going to be working hand in hand with the Czech Presidency, which is well prepared and well motivated. So I wish you the best of success, and we look forward to working hand in glove with you.
There's very broad debate that touched on many, many subjects. Dear Prime Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Thank you, everyone, for a very lively debate, for many questions, many remarks. I believe that all of this is pointing at, and it is indeed a signal for me, pointing at that the priorities of the Czech presidency have been chosen very well. You've drawn my attention to other aspects that I could not mention in my speech for time reasons, but we will address these as well. We take them very seriously. Very quickly, very briefly, I will try to reflect some of the remarks that were made. Maybe let me start in a more general manner, speaking about the conference on the future of the EU and certain level of impatience perhaps that we've heard here, very emotional impatience in Mr. Verhofstadt's speech that we've heard. I want to say that speed and emotions may not at times be the best friends of good results. I am concerned with Europe's future. I am concerned with the EU project. I've worked on the EU for 30 years, and I remember certain failures that we've had. Remember, for example, the European Constitution. Remember certain reforms that were ill-prepared or came too fast, leading to problems, leading to a weakening of EU support among citizens. I don't believe that we can attain better results if we are hasty. We have to carry out a proper debate. We have to listen to one another. We must not think that whoever wants to run faster is the better European, prioritizing haste over debate. If we listen to one another, if we respect one another, if we remember our common goal, then I believe we can achieve good results. The Czech presidency will not be an obstacle to anything. We will keep leading the debate, but we will be leading the debate so that it leads to good results. I would like to react to certain questions that were voiced as far as Article 7 was concerned. The Czech presidency will take those steps that a presidency country should take as a mediator, as a moderator, and we will try to achieve a peaceable result. That is our task. That is what a presidency country should be doing. Concerning questions on equality between men and women, and I'm intentionally mentioning what was mentioned repeatedly, the 18-month council program and the priorities of men and women equality. This is one of our priorities. Of course, we will try to progress in trialogue on pay transparency for men and women, and we will initiate the procedure on debating the proposal on enforcing the role and independence of bodies that play key roles in this regard. Equal opportunities for young men and women in the post-COVID recovery of our economy. Here we will organize in Prague on the 3rd and 4th of October a conference. And as far as the very specific question was concerned on rare diseases, also in Prague on the 25th and 26th of October, there will be in Prague an experts conference trying to achieve an improved access to medical care for patients suffering from rare diseases, and we will also be discussing the EU's plan on rare diseases. The main goal, as far as the free trade agreements were concerned, the main goal of the Czech presidency is to improve the landscape here and conclude free trade agreements. As you can see from the statistics, Europe has been lagging behind certain third countries, and of course this is something that we want to change. What will be key in this regard are the Indo-Pacific, Latin America and African regions, where the EU, by being inactive, is yielding the areas to our rivals, and we want to address this. Concerning Fit for 55, As far as this package is concerned, we're preparing for the next stages of the negotiations. We know the position of both co-legislators, the Council as well as the EP, and our task will be now to start the talks. One of the priorities, as you know, of the Czech Presidency is energy security. There was also a question mentioned repeatedly about the Schengen space, Bulgaria, Romania. What I can tell you is that as far as Croatia, Bulgaria and Romania, we are in contact with their governments and we intend to enlarge the Schengen space. Free movement of people is something that we take very seriously and I hope we will be able to achieve progress. Ladies and gentlemen, MEPs, thank you once more for the opportunity to speak to you this morning to present the Czech Presidency priorities. Thank you for all your contributions. Thank you for the debate. Thank you for your kind words of support, which I appreciate very much. And I am glad to be able to summarize the discussion that the European Parliament sees things in exactly the same light as us. And I see the cooperation between the Parliament and the Council as key to achieve what the EU citizens expect from us. The EU citizens expect from us to be able to solve and resolve the repercussions, consequences of the war, increasing prices of energy, of food and of other goods, the destroyed country that is Ukraine. Of course, the cause here is Russia with its aggressive policy. Even in this area, we can play a major role by continually supporting Ukraine and putting pressure on Russia. Our task is to reconcile all of these activities in one presidency. We have things to follow on from. We can follow on from the success of the French presidency, as I mentioned at the outset, and we have certain challenges and problems that we're facing that are massive, yes, but our task will be to address all of these at once, to improve the lives of our citizens, to improve the competitiveness of European economies, to assure safety and security in the EU and for the EU. Thank you once more. I look forward to our cooperation.
Thank you very, very much, Prime Minister. Thank you, dear colleagues, for this debate. We look forward to your presidency, as you've seen from all the comments by the colleagues. Thank you and good luck. This debate is closed and it will be followed with European Council and Commission statements on the conclusions of the European Council meeting of the 23rd and 24th of June.